Her sister showed up at 6 a.m. and asked, "Are you alone? Is your husband gone?" She said he was traveling. Her sister locked the door and said, "Perfect, because he didn't travel. I saw him last night at..." She then showed her the photos. When he came back, "Hi, my beautiful family, welcome back to Mr. Peter Stories, your own family story channel. May the Almighty pour his deepest mercy upon you and especially upon every woman who reads this message. May he clothe you with strength when life is heavy, with patience when the world is harsh, and with honor that no one can take away. You are the heart of every home, the quiet force behind every success, the love that keeps families alive even when no one says thank you. May your health be protected, your tears be counted and wiped away, and your sacrifices be rewarded in ways your heart has never imagined. May peace live in your soul, dignity walk beside you, and love return to you 1,000 times more than you give. This family stands because of women like you, and my prayers will always remember you first. If your heart is true, like the video. If your love is real, write, 'I am with Mr. Peter.'" The knock came at 6 in the morning, sharp and insistent, the kind of sound that shatters sleep and announces the end of something precious. Selena Gadot pulled on her robe, her mind foggy with sleep, and opened the door to find her sister Brielle standing on the porch. The winter darkness still clung to the edges of the sky, and Brielle's face looked pale in the dim light, her eyes red-rimmed and urgent. "Is Aiden home?" Brielle asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Selena frowned, confused by the strange question. "He's in Atlanta. Campaign meetings. Why? What's wrong?" Brielle stepped inside and locked the door behind her, a deliberate gesture that made Selena's stomach tighten with sudden dread. Her sister had never locked that door before, not in all the years of morning visits and coffee conversations and sisterly confidences. "He's not in Atlanta," Brielle said quietly. "Last night, Marcus and I went to Crimson and Oak for our anniversary dinner. I saw him there, Selena. I saw Aiden." The world seemed to tilt slightly, like the floor had become unsteady beneath Selena's feet. "That's impossible. He called me from his hotel room. He sent me a photo of..." "He was with a woman," Brielle interrupted, pulling out her phone with trembling hands. "A young woman. And Selena, she's pregnant. Very pregnant." The photos appeared on the screen one after another, each image a small violence against everything Selena thought she knew about her life. Aiden in the dim amber light of the restaurant, leaning close to a beautiful woman with auburn hair and a radiant smile. Aiden's hand resting protectively on her swollen belly, his fingers splayed wide in a gesture Selena recognized with sickening clarity. That was how he used to touch her, back when they were trying for a baby, back before the miscarriages turned hope into grief and grief into silence. "How pregnant does she look?" Selena heard herself ask, her voice oddly calm, clinical even, as if she were diagnosing someone else's trauma instead of living through her own. Brielle's eyes filled with tears. 7 months, maybe 8. 8 months. The words echoed in Selena's mind like a death knell. 8 months ago, she had been planning their anniversary trip to the mountains, selecting the perfect gift, believing they were rebuilding what the losses had broken between them. 8 months ago, Aiden had been holding her at night, promising they would try again when she was ready, telling her she was the only woman he would ever love. 8 months ago, he had already been planning her replacement. "Selena, say something," Brielle pleaded, reaching for her sister's hand. "Scream, cry, throw something. Don't just stand there looking like that." But Selena wasn't ready to break, not yet. She was a psychologist, trained to observe, to analyze, to understand behavior and motivation. She had spent a decade building Aiden's political career, sacrificing her own thriving practice to be the perfect senator's wife, learning to read rooms and manage crises and smile through pain. This was just another crisis to manage, another problem to solve with strategy instead of emotion. She studied the photos again, forcing herself to see past the betrayal and focus on the details. The woman was young, mid-20s perhaps, polished and confident in expensive clothes that spoke of old money. The way she touched Aiden's arm suggested familiarity, comfort, a relationship that had moved beyond the awkward early stages into something established and secure. "Who is she?" Selina asked. "I don't know. I tried to get closer, but Marcus pulled me away. He didn't want a scene. But Selina, the way Aiden looked at her, I've never seen him look at anyone like that, not even you." The truth of those words landed like a physical blow, but Selina refused to flinch. She had given Aiden everything: her career, her identity, her chance at motherhood after 3 devastating losses that had left her body broken and her heart hollow. She had stood beside him through every campaign speech, every fundraiser, every tedious political dinner where she smiled until her face ached and made small talk with people who bored her senseless. And he had been building a life with someone else, someone younger, someone whose body could do what Selina's could not. "I need you to leave," Selina said quietly. "What? No, I'm not leaving you alone right now." "Selina, you're in shock. Let me stay. Let me help you figure out what to do." "I know what to do," Selina replied, her voice gaining strength, "but I need to do it alone. Please, Brielle, trust me." Her sister hesitated, clearly torn between respecting Selina's wishes and the fierce protective instinct that had defined their relationship since childhood. Finally, she pulled Selina into a tight embrace. "Call me if you need anything. I mean it. Anything at all." After Brielle left, Selina stood in the silent house and let herself feel it, just for a moment. The rage, the humiliation, the bone-deep exhaustion of loving someone who had stopped seeing her as anything more than an obstacle to overcome. She felt it all wash through her like a wave, and then she locked it away in the place where she kept all the pain she couldn't afford to show the world. Then she picked up her phone and sent Aiden a text message, each word chosen with surgical precision. "Can't wait to celebrate our anniversary next month, baby. I have a surprise for you too." His response came within minutes, full of heart emojis and promises about making it special, making up for all the time apart, showing her how much she meant to him. Each lie was a small knife, but Selina read them with a smile. Let him think everything was perfect. Let him believe his careful deceptions had worked, that his wife was the same trusting fool she had been yesterday morning. By the time he came home, Selina would be someone else entirely. Someone who understood that love was a weapon and mercy was a luxury she could no longer afford. Someone who knew exactly how to take everything he valued and burn it to ash. She made coffee as the winter sun finally broke over the horizon, painting the kitchen in shades of gold and crimson. The morning truth had come knocking at her door, and instead of destroying her, it had set her free. Now she just had to make sure Aiden understood the price of that freedom. Chapter 2. The Theatre of Lies. Aiden came home 3 days later with an enormous bouquet of roses and a story about difficult meetings with campaign donors in Atlanta, about hotel rooms with terrible coffee and conference calls that stretched into the early morning hours. He looked tired but satisfied, like a man who believed he had successfully juggled all the competing demands of his complicated life. Selina met him at the door, with a kiss that tasted like poison, disguised as devotion. "I missed you so much," she said, and meant it in a way he would never understand. She had missed the man she thought she married, the one who existed only in her memories now, a ghost she needed to finally bury. "I missed you too, baby," Aiden replied, pulling her close. "These trips are getting harder. I hate being away from you." The ease with which the lies rolled off his tongue was almost impressive. Selina wondered how long he had been perfecting this performance, how many other trips had been covers for time spent with the pregnant woman whose name she still didn't know. That night she cooked his favorite meal, opened an expensive bottle of wine, and listened to him talk about his campaign strategy for the upcoming Senate race. He spoke with passion about his vision for the state, about the policies he wanted to champion, about the difference he believed he could make in people's lives. It would have been inspiring if Selina didn't know the truth, that Aiden cared less about helping people than about the power and prestige that came with the title of senator. "You're quiet tonight," Aiden observed, reaching across the table to take her hand. "Everything okay?" Just thinking about how far you've come, Selina replied smoothly. Remember when you were just a local councilman? Now look at you, on your way to Washington. Pride flashed across his face, exactly as she knew it would. Aidan's greatest weakness had always been his ego, his deep need to be seen as exceptional, chosen, destined for greatness. I couldn't have done any of it without you, he said, and Selina almost believed he meant it. You've sacrificed so much for my career, your practice, your time, everything. It was worth it, she lied. Seeing you succeed makes it all worthwhile. Later, in their bedroom, she let him make love to her while her mind catalogued every moment, every touch, storing them away as evidence of his betrayal. His hands on her body felt different now, contaminated by the knowledge of where else they had been, whose skin they had caressed with that same false tenderness. When he fell asleep beside her, Selina waited until his breathing settled into the deep rhythm that meant he was truly unconscious. Then she carefully extracted herself from the bed and retrieved his phone from where he had left it charging on the dresser. She knew his password. He had never bothered to hide it from her, secure in the assumption that his wife would never violate his privacy, never question his faithfulness, never imagine he could be anything less than the devoted husband he pretended to be. The messages were all there, a complete record of his double life, rendered in stark text and intimate photographs. McKenna Paris, that was her name. The conversation between them stretched back months, full of endearments and promises and plans for a future that included a baby boy they intended to name after Aidan's father. Selina scrolled through the messages with steady hands, her heart rate never increasing, her breathing never quickening. She had learned long ago how to separate emotion from observation, how to assess a situation with clinical detachment even when it threatened to tear her apart. But it was the text thread with Aidan's mother Judith that finally cracked her composure. After your primary win, we'll handle the Selina situation quietly, Judith had written. McKenna's family connections will secure your Senate seat. The Paris media empire will back you all the way to Washington. Trust me, darling, this is what's best for your career. What about Selina? Aidan had replied. She's been a good wife. She's been adequate, Judith had responded. But you need more than adequate now. You need power, connections, resources. McKenna can give you all of that. Selina has served her purpose. Selina read those words 3 times, letting them sink deep into the place where she kept all her pain. Served her purpose. Like she was a tool that had outlived its usefulness, a stepping stone that had been crossed and could now be discarded without ceremony or gratitude. For 10 years, she had tried to win Judith's approval, tried to be the daughter-in-law that cold, calculating woman would accept. She had changed her clothes, her hair, her manner of speaking. She had attended charity luncheons she hated and smiled through criticism disguised as advice. She had swallowed her pride and her opinions and her authentic self, all in the desperate hope that Judith would someday look at her with warmth instead of barely concealed contempt. And the entire time, Judith had been planning her disposal. Selina took screenshots of everything, methodically documenting the evidence. Then she created a new email account using a combination of letters and numbers that would be impossible to trace back to her. She sent herself all the screenshots, every message that proved Aidan's infidelity and Judith's orchestration of this elaborate betrayal. Before returning the phone to its place on the dresser, she deleted any record of her access, careful to cover her tracks. Then she climbed back into bed beside her sleeping husband, curled against his warm back, and let herself feel the full weight of what she had lost. Not Aidan, because the man she had loved had never really existed, but the dream of him, the future they had promised each other, the life she had built around the assumption that their love was real and lasting and true. In the darkness, she made a silent vow. She would let them think they had won. Let Judith believe her plan was working flawlessly. Let Aidan enjoy his fantasy of a perfect future with his young, fertile replacement. Let McKenna Paris imagine she had secured her place at the center of a rising political star's life. And when they were all comfortable in their victory, When they had forgotten to guard against the wounded woman they had so casually dismissed, Selina would show them exactly what happened when you underestimated someone who had nothing left to lose. She fell asleep with Aiden's arm around her waist, already dreaming of the different kinds of justice that existed outside the narrow confines of courts and laws, the kind of justice that lived in ruined reputations and shattered dreams, and the cold comfort of knowing you had made them understand, finally, what they had thrown away. Chapter 3. The Replacement. The campaign fundraiser was held at the historic Riverside estate, all gleaming marble and crystal chandeliers, the kind of ostentatious display of wealth that always made Selina vaguely uncomfortable. She arrived on Aiden's arm, wearing a dress Judith had picked out because image matters, dear, especially now. Selina had learned to exist in these spaces, to smile and charm and deflect, to be exactly what each conversation required. Tonight was no different, except that she was watching everything through new eyes, seeing the performance for what it truly was. "There's someone I want you to meet," Aiden said, guiding her through the crowd toward a group gathered near the ornate fireplace. "McKenna Paris. Her family owns Paris Media Group. They're going to be crucial to the campaign." Selina's heart hammered against her ribs, but her face remained serene, interested, perfectly composed. This was the moment she had been preparing for since Brielle showed her those photographs. McKenna Paris turned at the sound of her name, and Selina found herself face to face with the woman carrying her husband's child. Or rather, the woman carrying what everyone believed was her husband's child. She was even more beautiful in person, with luminous skin and intelligent hazel eyes that assessed Selina with unsettling directness. There was no guilt in that gaze, no shame or discomfort. Just cool evaluation, like McKenna was measuring Selina for a coffin. "McKenna, this is my wife Selina," Aiden said, oblivious to the current of tension running between the two women. "Selina, McKenna has been invaluable to the campaign. Her insights into media strategy have been remarkable." "It's wonderful to finally meet you," McKenna said, extending her hand. Her grip was firm, confident. "Aiden talks about you constantly. He says you really laid the groundwork for everything he's becoming." The word groundwork hung in the air like a challenge. Foundation, base layer, something you build on and then cover up with something more permanent, more beautiful, more worthy of display. "I've just tried to be supportive," Selina replied, matching McKenna's smile with one of her own. "A partner's success is something to celebrate." "Absolutely," McKenna agreed, her hand drifting to rest on her rounded belly in a gesture that seemed both natural and deliberately pointed. "Partnership is so important. Shared vision, shared goals, that's what builds something lasting." They spoke in code, these two women circling each other like predators establishing territory. To anyone watching, it was a polite conversation between the candidate's wife and a campaign volunteer. But underneath the surface, pleasantries ran something darker, sharper, more honest. "When are you due?" Selina asked, because she needed to hear McKenna say it, needed to watch her lie. "January," McKenna replied without hesitation. "It's my first, so I'm terrified and excited in equal measure." January, which meant conception happened in spring, right around the time Aiden had taken that week-long trip to the state capitol for legislative sessions. The trip where he had called Selina every night, telling her he loved her, that he couldn't wait to come home. "How exciting," Selina said. "Aiden and I always talked about having children. Life just had other plans." Something flickered in McKenna's eyes, there and gone too quickly to name. Sympathy, guilt, or just satisfaction at having won a competition Selina hadn't known she was losing. "I'm sure it will happen for you when the time is right," McKenna said, and the platitude felt like salt rubbed into an open wound. Before Selina could respond, Judith appeared at her elbow, materializing like a beautiful ghost in ivory silk. "McKenna, darling, there's someone you simply must meet," Judith said, linking her arm through McKenna's with maternal affection she had never shown Selina. The governor's chief of staff just arrived. As they walked away, Judith glanced back at Selina with an expression of such casual dismissal that it took Selina's breath away. She was already erased, already irrelevant, already consigned to the category of people who no longer mattered. "Quite a woman, isn't she?" said a voice beside her. Selina turned to find a man she didn't recognize, mid-40s perhaps, with kind eyes and an air of thoughtful observation that suggested he saw more than he said. "I'm sorry, have we met?" Selina asked. "Not formally. I'm Nathaniel Wade. I'm a documentary filmmaker. I've been following your husband's campaign for a project on political families and the hidden machinery of power." There was something in the way he said hidden machinery that made Selina pay closer attention. "That sounds fascinating," she said carefully. "It's revealing," Nathaniel replied. "The Paris family, for instance. From the outside, they look like old money, established power, the kind of dynasty that shapes policy without ever appearing on a ballot. But when you dig deeper—" He trailed off, watching her face. "What do you find when you dig deeper?" Selina asked. "Cracks in the foundation," Nathaniel said quietly. "Beautiful facades covering rot, people using people, everyone scrambling for advantage. No one quite as secure as they pretend to be." Selina studied him, trying to determine if he was warning her or testing her. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you look like someone who might benefit from seeing past the performance," Nathaniel replied. "And because in my experience, the people who get hurt worst in these political games are the ones who still believe in honesty and loyalty and love." Before Selina could respond, he handed her a business card. "If you ever want to talk off the record, just to understand what you're really dealing with, call me. Sometimes an outside perspective helps." He walked away, leaving Selina holding his card and feeling like the ground beneath her feet had shifted again, revealing new possibilities, new alliances, new ways of fighting back. She found Aidan 20 minutes later, holding court with a group of major donors, McKenna at his side, looking every inch the perfect political partner. They stood close, but not too close. Professional, but with an undercurrent of intimacy that anyone paying attention would notice. No one was paying attention except Selina. She watched Aidan touch McKenna's elbow to guide her into the conversation, watched McKenna laugh at his jokes with genuine delight, watched them share glances full of meaning that excluded everyone else in the room. Later, in the bathroom, Selina was washing her hands when Judith entered, checking her reflection in the ornate mirror with the critical eye of someone who had spent a lifetime wielding beauty as a weapon. "You handled that well," Judith said, addressing Selina's reflection rather than looking at her directly. "The meeting with McKenna, I was worried you might be difficult." "Why would I be difficult?" Selina asked, her voice neutral. "Because you're not stupid, dear," Judith replied, finally turning to face her. "You understand what's happening here. Aidan is ascending to a different level of power, and that requires certain sacrifices. You've been a good wife. You laid the groundwork, supported him when he was building from nothing. But now he needs more than good. He needs exceptional. He needs connections, resources, the kind of backing that can take him all the way to Washington." "And McKenna can provide that," Selina said flatly. "The Paris family owns 3 television stations, 2 newspapers, and a digital media empire that reaches every household in the state," Judith replied. "They have relationships with governors, senators, even presidential candidates. With them behind him, Aidan becomes unstoppable. Surely you can see that you'd want what's best for him." The casual cruelty of it took Selina's breath away. Judith was asking her to facilitate her own replacement, to step aside gracefully so that her husband could marry his pregnant mistress, all in service of political ambition that had nothing to do with making the world better and everything to do with accumulating power. "Of course," Selina heard herself say, "I've always put Aidan first." Relief flooded Judith's face, and she actually smiled, reaching out to squeeze Selina's hand in a gesture of approval that had come 10 years too late to mean anything. "I knew you'd understand," Judith said. "You're not like those other political wives who make everything about themselves. You have dignity. That's why we'll make sure you're taken care of financially. Aidan won't leave you with nothing." Selina nodded, playing the role of the gracious, understanding wife one last time. Judith hugged her, a brief, awkward embrace that smelled of expensive perfume and casual betrayal, and then swept out of the bathroom, leaving Selina alone with her reflection. She stared at herself in the mirror, at the woman who had spent a decade trying to be enough, trying to fit into a mold that was never designed to hold her. Then she straightened her shoulders, reapplied her lipstick, and walked back out into the fundraiser with a smile that promised nothing and threatened everything. On her way to find Aidan, she passed an open doorway leading to the estate's garden. Through the gap, she saw McKenna standing in the shadows, phone pressed to her ear, her voice low and urgent. Selina paused, hidden behind a marble column, and listened. "No, Daddy, I told you I'm handling it," McKenna was saying. "He doesn't suspect anything. By spring, I'll be Mrs. Senator Key, and you'll have your media bill passed. Just be patient." A pause, then, "I don't care what Julian thinks. This is about saving the company, not about my feelings. We can deal with Julian after everything is secure." Selina's mind raced. Julian. Who was Julian? And what media bill was McKenna talking about? She pulled out her phone and opened the Notes app, typing quickly. McKenna, Paris. Julian. Media bill. Paris Media Group financial troubles. When McKenna ended her call and turned back toward the party, Selina was already gone, melting back into the crowd with a head full of new questions and a growing sense that this game was far more complicated than she had realized. Everyone was using everyone. Aidan thought he was trading up for a better wife. McKenna was securing political leverage for her family. Judith was orchestrating everything to fulfill her own ambitions of being a kingmaker. And Selina? She was the only one they had all forgotten to account for, the only variable they had dismissed as irrelevant. That would be their fatal mistake. Chapter 4. The House of Cards. Selina spent the next 2 weeks becoming a detective in her own life, carefully piecing together the truth from fragments of overheard conversations, careless comments, and late-night research on her laptop while Aidan slept beside her. The Paris Media Group empire was crumbling. That was the first discovery, found buried in business journals and financial filings, that required knowing exactly where to look. Revenue was down across all their properties, advertising contracts were failing to renew, and they were leveraged to the breaking point with loans that would come due within the year. McKenna's father, Harrison Paris, had made a series of catastrophic investment decisions, betting heavily on media properties, just as the industry was collapsing around traditional models. Now the Paris family faced a choice: find a way to secure their financial future or watch their century-old dynasty crumble into bankruptcy and scandal. That was where Aidan came in. Selina found references to a proposed media regulation bill, currently stalled in committee, that would provide tax incentives and regulatory relief to struggling local media companies. If passed, it would be worth millions to the Paris family. But the bill needed a champion, someone with political capital and rising influence, someone who could push it through when he reached the Senate. Aidan was their champion, and McKenna was the price of his sponsorship. But the deeper Selina dug, the more complicated the picture became. She hired a private investigator, using money from an account Aidan didn't know she had, opened years ago when her psychology practice was still thriving. The investigator was a sharp-eyed woman named Rachel, who asked no questions and delivered results with professional detachment. The photographs arrived in a manila envelope 2 weeks after their initial meeting. McKenna Paris with a man who wasn't Aidan, photographed outside an upscale apartment building, their body language intimate and familiar. More photos showed them together at restaurants, in parks, standing close with the ease of people who had known each other far longer than a few months. His name was Julian Drake. He was a media consultant, frequently hired by the Paris family for strategic communications work. And according to Rachel's research, he and McKenna had been involved for years, long before Aidan Key entered the picture. The timeline became clear when Selina laid out all the evidence across her dining room table late one night after Aidan left for another campaign trip. McKenna had gotten pregnant in early spring, right around the time Julian Drake had been in town for a 6-week consulting project. Her relationship with Aidan had started in late spring, carefully timed, deliberately planned. The baby wasn't Aidan's. Selina sat with that knowledge, turning it over in her mind like a puzzle piece that suddenly made the entire picture come into focus. McKenna had gotten pregnant by the man she actually loved, then needed a powerful husband to legitimize the child and secure her family's financial future. Aidan, rising political star with Senate ambitions and a desperate need for the kind of backing the Paris family could provide, was the perfect mark. And Judith, so eager to see her son ascend to power, had orchestrated the entire arrangement without ever questioning the timeline or demanding proof that the baby was actually her grandchild. They were all using each other, all playing angles, all convinced of their own cleverness while being manipulated by someone else. It would have been almost funny if it hadn't been so devastating. Selina's phone rang, interrupting her dark thoughts. The number was unfamiliar, but she answered anyway, some instinct telling her it mattered. "Dr. Godot, this is Nathaniel Wade. We met briefly at the fundraiser. I hope I'm not calling too late." Selina glanced at the clock. It was past 11, but she was wide awake, running on adrenaline and fury, and something that felt almost like exhilaration. "Not too late," she said. "What can I do for you?" "I've been doing more research on the Paris family," Nathaniel said carefully. "And I keep finding connections to your husband's campaign that don't quite add up. I was hoping we could talk, maybe compare notes. I think there's a story here that needs to be told." Selina looked down at the photographs spread across her table, at the documented evidence of betrayal and manipulation and casual cruelty that had defined the last year of her life. "I think you're right," she said. "When can we meet?" They agreed on a coffee shop across town, neutral territory where neither of them was likely to run into anyone from Aidan's political circles. After hanging up, Selina carefully gathered all her evidence and locked it away in a safe deposit box at a bank Aidan had never heard of. Then she returned to her psychology practice, the career she had set aside but never completely abandoned. Her former colleagues welcomed her back with warmth that felt almost foreign after years of navigating Judith's cold disapproval and the transactional relationships of political life. One of her first new clients was Nathaniel Wade himself, seeking therapy for grief that hadn't resolved even 2 years after his wife's death. "I know this is unconventional," he said during their first session, settling into the leather chair across from her desk. "Asking for professional help from someone I'm also collaborating with on a documentary project." "Grief doesn't care about conventional boundaries," Selina replied gently, "and sometimes we need multiple kinds of support simultaneously. Tell me about your wife." Over the next hour, Nathaniel described a marriage that had been genuinely happy, built on mutual respect and shared creative passion. His wife, Elena, had been a photographer, and they had traveled the world together, documenting stories of resilience and resistance, finding beauty in places others overlooked. She had died in a car accident, sudden and senseless, leaving Nathaniel with a grief so profound it had nearly destroyed his ability to work, to create, to imagine a future worth living. "I keep thinking I should be over it by now," Nathaniel said, his voice rough with emotion. 2 years should be enough time to move forward, but some days it hits me just as hard as it did the day she died." "Grief doesn't follow a schedule," Selina told him. "It comes in waves, and sometimes those waves are just as powerful years later as they were in the beginning. The goal isn't to get over it. The goal is to learn to carry it without letting it define your entire existence." When the session ended, Nathaniel paused at the door. "Can I ask you something, not as your client, but as someone who recognizes pain in other people? What happened to you? I saw it at that fundraiser. You were standing in a room full of people, but you looked completely alone." Selina considered deflecting, maintaining the professional boundary between therapist and client. But something about Nathaniel's directness, his willingness to be vulnerable first, made her want to be honest. "I'm married to a man who's planning to leave me for someone younger," she said quietly. "His mother orchestrated the whole thing. They think I don't know yet. They think I'll just step aside gracefully when the time comes. Will you? Nathaniel asked. Selina smiled, and there was something fierce in it, something that had been sleeping during all those years of trying to be the perfect political wife. Not even close, she said. Later that week, she met Nathaniel at the coffee shop to share what she had discovered. He brought his own research, boxes full of financial documents and recorded interviews and evidence of the Paris family's corruption that went far deeper than she had imagined. They're not just struggling, Nathaniel explained, spreading papers across the table between them. They've been engaged in systematic fraud for years, inflating circulation numbers to charge more for advertising, using their media platforms to extort favorable coverage from politicians, funneling money through shell companies to avoid taxes. Can you prove it? Selina asked. I can prove some of it, Nathaniel replied, but I need more. I need someone who understands the connections, who can help me see how all these pieces fit together. Selina thought about McKenna's overheard phone conversation, about the media bill that would save the Paris empire, about Aiden being used as a political tool while believing he was making strategic choices. What if I told you McKenna Paris is pregnant with another man's child? She asked. What if I told you this entire relationship between her and my husband is a carefully constructed fraud designed to secure political leverage? Nathaniel's eyes widened. Can you prove that? I can prove the affair with Julian Drake, Selina said. A paternity test would prove the rest, but that requires access I don't have yet. Yet, Nathaniel repeated, catching the implication. You have a plan. I'm working on one, Selina admitted, but I need to understand something first. Why does this matter to you? Why invest all this time and energy into exposing one corrupt family? Nathaniel was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee cup as if it held answers to questions he hadn't quite figured out how to ask. Because Elena and I spent our careers telling stories about people who got crushed by systems of power they couldn't fight, he finally said. We documented their suffering, but we couldn't change the outcome. I couldn't save them. I couldn't even save her when some drunk driver ran a red light and destroyed our future in an instant. He looked up, meeting Selina's eyes with an intensity that made her breath catch. But maybe I can help you save yourself, he continued. Maybe that's worth something. Maybe that makes her death mean something, if I can use what she taught me to help someone fight back against people who think they're untouchable. Selina reached across the table and took his hand, a gesture of comfort that blurred the line between professional therapist and fellow wounded soul. Then let's save each other, she said. Let's burn down everything they built on lies and figure out who we are when we're not defined by the people who tried to break us. Nathaniel squeezed her hand gently before releasing it. I should warn you, he said. I'm falling in love with you, not because you need saving, but because you're the first person in 2 years who's made me believe in something beyond grief. Selina's heart contracted with fear and longing in equal measure. She wanted to lean into the possibility he represented, wanted to believe in love that wasn't transactional, wasn't manipulative, wasn't built on convenient lies and political calculations. But she had trusted Aiden once, had believed in his promises, had given him everything she was only to discover it was never enough. I can't, she said softly. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I don't know how to trust anymore. Then I'll wait, Nathaniel replied simply. However long it takes for you to believe that not everyone is like him, that some people mean what they say. They spent the rest of the afternoon building a strategy, laying out the evidence, identifying the gaps they needed to fill before they could expose the truth in a way that would actually matter. When Selina finally drove home, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope, not the desperate, clinging hope of someone drowning and grasping for rescue, but the fierce, determined hope of someone who had decided to swim for shore, even if it killed her. She was going to destroy them all. Aiden, Judith, McKenna, the entire corrupt system they had built on the assumption that people like Selina, people who believed in love and loyalty and basic human decency, were too weak to fight back. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Chapter 5. The Gathering Storm. Thanksgiving arrived with the first real cold of winter, frost glazing the windows and breath visible in the morning air. Selina had been dreading this day for weeks, ever since Judith had announced they would celebrate at her estate, that it would be a special family gathering to be grateful for everything we're building together. The invitation had included McKenna Paris. Selina arrived at Judith's house with a sweet potato casserole and a smile that felt like armor. Aidan had driven separately from yet another campaign event, promising to meet her there, leaving Selina to face his family alone. Judith greeted her at the door with a perfunctory kiss on the cheek that landed somewhere in the vicinity of Selina's ear. "You're early," Judith said, not quite accusingly but close. "McKenna isn't here yet." As if the entire purpose of the gathering was to showcase Aidan's replacement, with Selina included only as an afterthought, a courtesy extended to someone whose exit was already planned, but not yet executed. "I brought dessert too," Selina said, holding up a pecan pie. "I know it's Aidan's favorite." Something flickered across Judith's face, there and gone too quickly to name. Irritation, perhaps, or just the habitual impatience of a woman who had never bothered to hide her disappointment in her daughter-in-law. "How thoughtful," Judith said flatly. "Come in. Cameron is already here with his wife." Aidan's younger brother Cameron had always been kind to Selina, in the passive way of someone who recognized injustice but lacked the courage to challenge it directly. His wife Denise was warm and genuine, qualities that made her something of an outsider in the key family hierarchy. "Selina!" Denise called out, pulling her into a hug that actually felt real. "I'm so glad you're here. This family needs more normal people." They settled in the formal living room, making small talk about holiday plans and work, and the mundane details of life that felt surreal, given what Selina knew about the elaborate betrayal being orchestrated around her. Aidan arrived shortly after, and the way Judith lit up in his presence made Selina's chest tighten with old pain. Judith had never looked at her that way, had never offered her the unconditional love and pride she poured onto her sons, especially Aidan, her golden child, her favorite, the one who was going to make the key name matter on a national stage. "Mum, you look beautiful," Aidan said, kissing Judith's cheek. "Flattery won't get you out of carving the turkey," Judith replied, but she was smiling, genuinely pleased in a way Selina had spent 10 years trying and failing to earn. When McKenna arrived 30 minutes later, visibly pregnant and radiant in a burgundy dress that perfectly complemented her coloring, the energy in the room shifted. Suddenly, everyone was animated, solicitous, focused entirely on making sure McKenna was comfortable, that she had everything she needed, that this stranger was welcomed into the family while Selina sat watching like a ghost at her own funeral. Judith seated McKenna next to Aidan at the dining table, in the chair that had been Selina's place for a decade. Selina found herself relegated to the far end, between Denise and an empty chair that stayed empty throughout the meal, a physical representation of her irrelevance. "McKenna was telling me about her family's media holdings," Judith said, directing the conversation like a conductor leading an orchestra. "It's so impressive how they've built such an empire. Aidan will benefit tremendously from that kind of partnership." Partnership, not relationship, not even marriage. Partnership, as if they were discussing a business merger rather than human beings building a life together. "My father is very committed to supporting leaders who share our values," McKenna said smoothly, her hand resting on her belly in a gesture that had become habitual. "We believe in the power of media to shape conversations and build consensus around important policies." Selina watched Aidan drink in every word, saw the hunger in his eyes as he imagined the power and influence that came with the Paris family backing. He had always been more interested in what people could do for him than who they actually were, but this was different. This was him consciously trading one life for another, discarding the woman who had stood beside him from the beginning in favor of someone who could take him higher, faster, further. "Selina, you've been so quiet," McKenna said suddenly, turning her attention down the table with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You must be so proud of everything Aiden is accomplishing. It was a challenge, deliberate and unmistakable. McKenna was asserting her dominance, marking territory, making sure everyone in the room understood that she was the future, while Selena was merely the past. I'm very proud, Selena replied evenly. I've watched him grow from a local councilman into someone who might actually make a difference in people's lives. That journey has been remarkable. All those years of support must feel so validating now, McKenna continued, and there was something almost cruel in her tone, an edge that suggested she knew exactly what she was doing. Like you were building something that will outlast your contribution to it. The words landed like small explosions around the table. Denise gasped softly. Cameron's face flushed with anger. Even Aiden looked uncomfortable, though he said nothing, just reached under the table to squeeze McKenna's hand in a gesture of solidarity that chose her over the wife he had sworn to love and honor and cherish. McKenna, perhaps we could talk about something else, Judith said, but her tone was amused rather than reproachful. She was enjoying this, enjoying the public humiliation of the daughter-in-law who had never quite measured up. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of forced conversation and barely concealed tension. When Judith announced it was time for dessert and a special presentation, Selena felt her stomach drop with premonition. Judith had prepared a slideshow projected onto the wall of her formal dining room. Aiden's Journey, she called it, a visual history of his political rise from city council to state legislature to Senate candidate. The photos began with Aiden's early campaigns, young and idealistic, full of fire and conviction. Selena appeared in perhaps 5 of them, always in the background, always slightly out of focus, as if the photographer hadn't quite known what to do with her presence. But as the slideshow progressed, Selena's image grew fainter, more infrequent. Photos from the last 2 years barely included her at all, and when they did, she had been cropped out partially, reduced to a shoulder or an arm at the edge of the frame, a fragment of a person who no longer mattered enough to warrant full inclusion. Meanwhile, McKenna appeared more and more frequently in the recent photos, positioned prominently beside Aiden, smiling into the camera with confidence and ease. Looking at the slideshow, a stranger would assume McKenna had been part of Aiden's journey for years, while Selena was merely a brief, forgettable episode. Judith had literally erased her from Aiden's history. While Selena was still alive, still legally his wife, still wearing his ring and sleeping in his bed, Judith had methodically removed her from the family narrative and replaced her with the woman they had chosen to be her successor. "Isn't it wonderful to see how far he's come?" Judith said, her voice thick with pride and satisfaction. Selena stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor with a sound like a scream. Every eye turned to her, but she was looking only at Aiden, at the man she had loved for more than a decade, the man who was sitting there watching her be publicly humiliated and erased and doing absolutely nothing to stop it. "Excuse me," Selena said, her voice perfectly steady. "I need some air." She walked out of the dining room, through the ornate hallway, and into the cold night air of Judith's garden. The tears came then, hot and angry, streaming down her face as she let herself feel the full weight of what they had done to her. She hadn't just lost her marriage. She had lost her history, her identity, her place in a story she had helped write. They had taken everything she gave them and thrown it away like it meant nothing, like she meant nothing, like 10 years of devotion and sacrifice and love could be reduced to irrelevant background noise in someone else's triumph. "Selena?" She turned to find Cameron standing in the doorway, his face twisted with shame and anger. "This isn't right," he said quietly. "What Mom did in there, what they're all doing, it's not right." "But you won't say anything," Selena replied, not accusing, just stating a fact. "You'll go back in there and finish your dessert and pretend you didn't just watch your mother erase me from your brother's life." Cameron flinched at the accuracy of her assessment. "I don't know how to fight her. None of us do. She's always been like this, controlling everything, manipulating people to get what she wants. If I speak up, she'll just cut me out of the family, and then what? I lose everyone. So I lose everything instead, Selina said softly. That's more acceptable. No, Cameron said fiercely. It's not acceptable. That's why I need to tell you something I heard Aiden and Mom discussing last week. Selina wiped her tears, forcing herself to focus despite the ache in her chest. What? Cameron took a deep breath, clearly struggling with the decision to betray his family's confidence. The baby McKenna is carrying. I don't think it's Aiden's. I've been watching them together and something feels off. The timeline doesn't add up. The way McKenna talks about the pregnancy, it's like she's performing for an audience rather than living through a real experience. Do you have proof? Selina asked, her heart starting to race. No, Cameron admitted. Just suspicion. But Selina, if you're right, if this baby isn't his, then everything they're planning is built on a lie. Maybe that's something you could use. Maybe that's how you fight back. Selina looked at this man who had never quite had the courage to stand up to his mother, who was offering her scraps of resistance while safely maintaining his place in the family hierarchy. She should have felt grateful, but all she felt was tired. Thank you for telling me, she said. But Cameron, your suspicion isn't enough. I need evidence. I need proof that can't be dismissed or explained away. Then find it, Cameron urged, before they destroy you completely. Because that's what they're planning. Mom has been talking about making sure you're handled quietly, minimizing any potential embarrassment to Aiden's campaign. They're not just replacing you, they're trying to erase you so thoroughly that no one will even remember you were there. Selina nodded slowly, the last pieces of her heart hardening into something sharp and useful. They can try, she said, but I'm harder to erase than they think. She walked back into the house, collected her coat, and informed Judith she was leaving early, claiming a migraine. No one tried to stop her. No one even seemed particularly concerned. On the drive home, Selina called Rachel, her private investigator. I need you to get me DNA evidence, Selina said. Whatever it takes. I need to prove that baby isn't Aiden's. That's going to be difficult without McKenna's cooperation, Rachel replied. I don't care if it's difficult, Selina said, her voice hard. I care if it's possible. There was a pause, then, it's possible, but it will take time and money and some morally questionable methods. I have time, Selina said. I have money. And at this point, I don't care about morally questionable. After hanging up, she sat in her car outside the dark house she had shared with Aiden for years and made a decision. She was done being the gracious, understanding wife. She was done absorbing their cruelty and betrayal with quiet dignity. They wanted to erase her. She was going to make damn sure they never forgot her name. Chapter 6. The Breaking Point. December arrived wrapped in snow and freezing rain, the kind of weather that turned the world grey and bleak and made everything harder. Aiden's primary victory celebration was held at the Capitol, all champagne toasts and backslapping congratulations and promises of a brilliant future ahead. Selina attended because absence would have raised questions she wasn't ready to answer yet. She wore the blue dress Judith had picked out, smiled for the cameras, and pretended not to notice how McKenna stood just slightly closer to Aiden than was strictly appropriate for a campaign volunteer. The baby was due within weeks now, and McKenna carried her pregnancy like a crown, like proof of her superiority, her fertility a weapon against the woman who had failed at the one biological imperative that supposedly defined female worth. Selina watched Aiden give his victory speech, talking about family values and commitment to the people and building a future everyone could believe in. The hypocrisy was almost beautiful in its completeness, a perfect demonstration of how easily people could believe their own lies when the alternative required accountability. After the speech, after the photographs and interviews and endless handshaking, Aiden pulled Selina into a quiet corner of the venue. "We need to talk," he said, and something in his tone made Selina's pulse quicken. This was it. the moment he had been building toward for months. "All right," Selina replied calmly. "I want a divorce," Aidan said, not quite meeting her eyes. "We've grown apart, you know we have, and I think it's time we both admitted this marriage isn't working anymore." There it was, the final rejection, delivered with all the warmth of a business transaction. Selina felt something inside her break free, some last thread of hope or denial or foolish belief that maybe, somehow, things could still be saved. "Is there someone else?" she asked, even though she knew the answer, needed to hear him say it. Aidan hesitated, clearly debating how much honesty the situation required. "I've developed feelings for someone," he finally admitted. "It wasn't planned, it just happened. But yes, I want to be free to pursue that relationship." "McKenna," Selina said flatly. He looked startled, as if he hadn't expected her to know, as if his careful discretion had actually fooled anyone. "Yes. McKenna and I want to build a life together. She's having my baby, Selina. I'm going to be a father." The cruelty of those words, spoken to a woman who had lost 3 pregnancies and carried the scars of that loss in her body and her heart, was breathtaking in its casual thoughtlessness. "When?" Selina asked. "When did this start?" "Does it matter?" Aidan replied, already defensive. "What matters is that we're both unhappy. We have been for a long time. This is the right thing to do." "The right thing would have been not cheating on your wife with a younger woman while I was still grieving our lost children," Selina said, her voice quiet but razor-sharp. "The right thing would have been being honest months ago, before you let me stand beside you at campaign events like an idiot while everyone whispered behind my back." "I didn't want to hurt you," Aidan said, and he actually sounded like he believed it. "I was trying to find the right time, the right way to handle this." "The right time," Selina repeated, and something that might have been laughter bubbled up in her chest, dark and bitter. "You mean after the primary, so it wouldn't hurt your campaign numbers? After you secured McKenna and her family's support? After you made sure I couldn't cause any problems for your political future?" "That's not fair," Aidan protested. "You're making this about politics when it's about our relationship." "Everything with you has always been about politics," Selina shot back. "Our entire marriage has been about what served your ambitions. I gave up my career for you. I stood beside you through every campaign, every fundraiser, every tedious dinner with donors who bored me to tears. I tried for years to make your mother accept me, and when my body couldn't give you children, you just found someone who could and discarded me like I was nothing." "You're not nothing," Aidan said, but the words rang hollow. "I'm offering you a generous settlement. The house, half the savings, continued health insurance. You'll be fine." "I'll be fine," Selina echoed. "That's your measurement of what I deserve after 10 years? To be fine?" "What do you want me to say?" Aidan asked, frustration creeping into his voice. "That I still love you? I don't. I haven't for a long time. We both know that." And there it was. The truth neither of them had been willing to speak aloud. He didn't love her anymore. Maybe he never really had. Maybe she had just been convenient, useful, the right kind of supportive partner for a young politician building his career. "I need a few weeks to arrange things," Selina said quietly. "I don't want this to become a media circus right as your Senate campaign is launching. It wouldn't be good for either of us." Relief flooded Aidan's face, and Selina felt a spark of satisfaction at how easily he believed her continued concern for his well-being. He didn't see the trap he was walking into, didn't recognize that her compliance was strategy rather than resignation. "Thank you for understanding," Aidan said. "This is better for both of us, Selina, you'll see. Once we're both free, we can find happiness with people who are better suited for us." He actually seemed to believe he was being kind, that he was doing her a favor by releasing her from a marriage he had already abandoned in everything but legal documentation. Selina nodded, not trusting her voice to remain steady. She left the celebration early, claiming exhaustion, and drove through the snowy streets to the coffee shop where she had arranged to meet Nathaniel. He was waiting in a corner booth, concern evident in his eyes as she slid into the seat across from him. "He asked for a divorce," Selina said without preamble. "He wants to marry McKenna after the baby is born." "I'm sorry," Nathaniel said softly. "I know that even when you expect something, it still hurts when it actually happens." "I thought I'd feel angrier," Selina admitted. "But mostly I just feel tired, like I've been carrying something heavy for so long that I forgot what it felt like to stand up straight." Nathaniel reached across the table and took her hand, a gesture of comfort that felt different from anything Aidan had ever offered. There was no agenda in Nathaniel's touch, no calculation or hidden motive, just genuine human connection, freely given, expecting nothing in return. "I finished the documentary research," Nathaniel said quietly. "I have enough evidence to prove the Paris family has been engaged in systematic fraud. Fake circulation numbers, manipulated ratings, financial misrepresentation to investors. If I release it, they'll be destroyed. McKenna's family will lose everything." Selina looked at him, at this man who had become something more than an ally, something that might have been a friend or could become something deeper if she ever learned to trust again. "Show me," she said. He pulled out his laptop and walked her through months of investigation, financial documents showing the Paris Empire's debts, recorded interviews with former employees describing the fraud they had been pressured to participate in, email chains discussing how to use their media properties to extort favorable coverage from politicians and business leaders. It was damning, comprehensive, and exactly the kind of ammunition Selina needed. "If you release this, Aidan's association with the Paris family will destroy his Senate campaign," Selina said slowly, thinking through the implications. "Everyone will assume he knew about their criminal activities, that he was complicit in the fraud." "Yes," Nathaniel confirmed, "which is why I haven't released it yet, because I wanted to make sure you were ready for what comes next. Once this goes public, there's no taking it back. Everyone connected to the Paris family will be touched by the scandal, including your husband." "Soon-to-be ex-husband," Selina corrected. "And Nathaniel, I don't care about Aidan's career anymore. I don't care if he loses everything. He made his choice when he decided I wasn't enough." "I understand," Nathaniel said, "but there's something else you should know. I had Rachel do some additional investigation into McKenna's personal life. She found something interesting. He pulled up a series of photographs showing McKenna with Julian Drake, the media consultant Rachel had identified months earlier, but these were more recent, taken within the last few weeks. McKenna and Julian at a medical office. McKenna and Julian embracing in the parking lot, both of them crying. "She had a paternity test done," Nathaniel explained. "Rachel managed to get access to the results through a contact at the lab. The baby isn't Aidan's, it's Julian Drake's." Selina stared at the documents, feeling something that might have been vindication or might just have been exhaustion. All these months of suspicion and investigation, and here was the proof, irrefutable and damning. "McKenna knows?" Selina asked. "She's always known," Nathaniel confirmed. "She got pregnant by Julian, then seduced Aidan to provide legitimacy and political leverage for her family. Your husband is being used just as much as you were." Selina should have felt satisfaction at learning Aidan was also a victim of McKenna's manipulation. But all she felt was sadness for the man she had once loved, the one who existed before ambition and ego had eroded everything good in him. "What are you going to do?" Nathaniel asked gently. Selina closed the laptop and looked at him, at this kind man who had helped her piece together the truth without asking for anything in return except maybe the chance to help her heal. "I'm going to give Aidan a choice," she said slowly. "I'm going to show him everything we've found, all the evidence of how he's being used and manipulated, and then I'm going to let him decide if he wants to continue down this path or if he wants to choose differently." "That's remarkably generous," Nathaniel observed, "after everything he's done to you." "It's not generous," Selina replied. "It's strategic. If I just expose everything publicly, Aidan becomes a victim, and I become the vindictive ex-wife. But if I give him the information and he chooses to continue anyway, then he owns every consequence that follows." Nathaniel smiled, and there was admiration in his eyes. "You're terrifying. You know that, right? In the best possible way." Despite everything, Selina felt herself smile back. "I spent 10 years being accommodating and understanding and endlessly flexible. It didn't save my marriage, so maybe it's time to try being terrifying instead." They talked for another hour, planning strategy, discussing timing, weighing options. When Selina finally drove home through the snowy darkness, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Not happiness exactly, but purpose. Direction. The sense that she was finally moving forward instead of being swept along by currents she couldn't control. Her phone buzzed with a text from Aidan. "Thank you again for being so understanding about everything. You've always been gracious, even in difficult situations. That's one of the things I've always appreciated about you." Selina read the message 3 times, trying to find some hidden meaning beneath the words, some indication that Aidan felt even a fraction of the pain he had caused. But there was nothing, just casual appreciation for her continued willingness to make his life easier, even as he discarded her for someone newer, younger, more useful to his ambitions. She deleted the message without responding and turned off her phone. Tomorrow she would put her plan in motion. Tomorrow she would offer Aidan the choice that would determine whether he had any decency left beneath the polished politician facade. But tonight she allowed herself to grieve. Not for the marriage she was losing, but for all the versions of herself she had sacrificed trying to save it. The ambitious psychologist she had been, the woman who had believed in love and partnership and mutual respect, the person who had looked at Aidan Key and seen a future worth building, instead of a man who would see her as nothing more than a stepping stone toward power. Tomorrow she would be strong. Tonight she let herself be broken one last time before she rebuilt herself into something harder, sharper, impossible to erase. Chapter 7. The Discovery That Changes Everything. The call from Rachel came 2 days before Christmas, in the middle of a rare, quiet evening when Selina was attempting to read a book and failing to focus on anything except the elaborate destruction she was planning. "I have it," Rachel said without preamble. "The proof you need. But Selina, there's more. Something I think you need to know before you decide how to proceed." They met at Rachel's office, a small space above a dry cleaner that smelled faintly of chemicals and coffee. Rachel had spread documents across her desk, like evidence at a crime scene, each piece contributing to a picture that was far uglier than Selina had imagined. "The paternity test confirms it," Rachel began. "Julian Drake is the biological father of McKenna's baby. I was able to obtain the results through a contact at the medical lab where McKenna had the test done. She knows. She's known from the beginning." Selina studied the documents, the clinical language rendering her husband's betrayal in stark percentages and genetic markers. Excluded as biological father. The words should have brought satisfaction, but they just felt heavy. "You said there was more," Selina prompted. Rachel hesitated, which was unusual. In all their months of working together, Rachel had never shown uncertainty about delivering information, no matter how uncomfortable. "I kept digging into the Paris family connections," Rachel finally said, trying to understand why they were so desperate to tie themselves to Aidan's political career. "The financial troubles are worse than even Nathaniel uncovered. Harrison Paris is facing bankruptcy and possible fraud charges. He's used the media company as his personal piggy bank for years, and the whole empire is about to collapse." "We already knew that," Selina said. "Yes, but what we didn't know is that Judith is involved," Rachel continued, sliding another set of documents across the desk. "Your mother-in-law has been receiving payments from Harrison Paris for the last 18 months. Substantial payments funneled through shell corporations and offshore accounts. She's not just facilitating Aidan's relationship with McKenna, she's being paid to do it." The room seemed to tilt slightly. Selina gripped the edge of the desk, trying to process what Rachel was saying. "Judith knows," Selina whispered. "She knows McKenna is pregnant with another man's child, and she's still pushing Aidan toward this marriage. Not just pushing, Rachel corrected, orchestrating. According to the financial records and email correspondence I was able to obtain, Judith has been working with Harrison Paris since before Aidan and McKenna even met. They identified Aidan as a useful political target, someone ambitious enough to be manipulated, connected enough to be valuable. Judith agreed to facilitate a relationship between her son and McKenna in exchange for money and political favors. Selina felt sick. This wasn't just betrayal. It was premeditated exploitation, a mother selling her own son's future for financial gain and political leverage. "Does Aidan know?" Selina asked, though she already knew the answer. "No," Rachel confirmed. "He has no idea his mother has been manipulating him. He thinks this is all his choice, his decision to pursue a better future with a woman who can give him everything you couldn't." The cruelty of it was almost incomprehensible. Judith was willing to let Aidan raise another man's child, destroy his marriage, and build his political career on a foundation of lies, all while profiting financially from his pain. "There's one more thing," Rachel said quietly. "McKenna is also being manipulated. I found communication between her and Julian Drake, suggesting she's terrified of what her father will do if she doesn't go through with this plan. Harrison Paris has been threatening her, controlling her, using her pregnancy as leverage to force cooperation." Selina looked up sharply. "McKenna is a victim too?" "I think so," Rachel replied. "That doesn't excuse her role in destroying your marriage. But it does complicate the picture. Everyone is using everyone else. Judith is using Aidan for money and power. Harrison is using McKenna to save his business. McKenna is using Aidan for legitimacy while being controlled by her father. And Aidan is using you, or was, until he decided to trade up for a model that better served his ambitions." Selina stood and walked to the window, looking down at the snowy street below where people hurried past, wrapped in their own dramas and crises and ordinary unhappiness. None of them knew that just above their heads, a woman was learning the full extent of how thoroughly her life had been destroyed by people who were supposed to love her. "What do you want to do with this information?" Rachel asked. Selina turned back, her mind already working through the possibilities. She could expose everything publicly, burn it all down in a spectacular display of revelation and ruin. But that would make her the villain in Aidan's narrative, the bitter ex-wife who couldn't let go gracefully. Or she could use the information more strategically, giving Aidan the choice to see the truth and decide for himself whether he wanted to continue being manipulated by his own mother. "I need to think," Selina said. "Can you give me copies of everything?" Rachel handed over a thick folder and a flash drive. "It's all there. Financial records, emails, the paternity test, everything. What you do with it is your decision." Selina took the evidence home and spent the night reading through it all, piecing together the full scope of the conspiracy that had destroyed her marriage. By dawn, she had made her decision. She called Nathaniel. "I need your help," she said, "and I need it now." They met at a diner on the edge of town, the kind of place where nobody paid attention to anyone else's conversations. Selina showed him everything Rachel had uncovered, watching his expression shift from surprise to disgust to something that looked like pity. "Judith did this to her own son," Nathaniel said, shaking his head. "That's unconscionable." "That's Judith," Selina replied. "Power and status matter more to her than anything else, including her children's happiness." "What's your plan?" Nathaniel asked. Selina took a deep breath. "I'm going to tell Aidan everything. Show him the evidence. Let him see how thoroughly he's been manipulated by the people he trusts most. And then I'm going to give him a choice." "What choice?" "He can walk away from McKenna and her family, make a public statement about being deceived, and salvage what's left of his integrity," Selina explained. "Or he can continue forward with this sham marriage, knowing the truth but choosing power and political expedience over honesty." "And if he chooses wrong?" Nathaniel asked. "Then I'll destroy him," Selina said simply. "I'll release everything to the media. The affair, the paternity fraud, Judith's financial arrangement with the Paris family. I'll make sure everyone knows exactly who Aidan Key really is beneath the polished politician exterior. Nathaniel was quiet for a long moment. That's a lot of mercy to offer someone who's treated you so poorly. It's not mercy, Selina corrected. It's strategy. If I expose him without giving him a chance to choose differently, he becomes a victim, and I become the vindictive ex-wife. But if I give him all the information and he still chooses to continue the lies, then every consequence that follows is his own fault. When? Nathaniel asked. Soon, Selina replied. Before the baby is born, before it becomes even more complicated. But fate had other plans. 3 days later, McKenna went into labor. The baby arrived in late December, healthy and perfect, a son that Aidan immediately claimed as his own, posting photos on social media with captions about the greatest gift and beginning our future together. Selina saw the photos on her phone, this child who would grow up believing Aidan Key was his father, never knowing the truth about his biological origin, and she felt something shift inside her, some last reserve of mercy or compassion finally exhausted. They had brought an innocent child into this web of lies and manipulation. That changed everything. Her phone rang. It was Cameron. "Selina, I did something," he said, his voice tight with anxiety. "I took one of the baby's diapers from the hospital. I had a paternity test done. I needed to know if my suspicions were true." Selina's heart began to race. "And?" "The baby isn't Aidan's," Cameron said. "I have the results. Scientific proof that my brother is raising another man's child. What do I do? Do I tell him?" "Yes," Selina said immediately. "You tell him everything. He deserves to know the truth before he makes any more irrevocable decisions." "He's going to be devastated," Cameron said quietly. "This will destroy him." "He was perfectly willing to destroy me," Selina replied. "Maybe it's time he understood what that feels like." After hanging up, Selina sat in the quiet of her apartment, the place she had moved to after finally leaving the house she had shared with Aidan. She felt suspended between past and future, waiting for the revelation that would change everything. The call came 6 hours later. Aidan, his voice ragged with emotion, begging to see her, saying he needed to talk to her urgently, that Cameron had told him something impossible and he needed her help understanding it. "Please, Selina," he said, and she heard genuine fear in his voice for the first time in their entire relationship. "Please, I don't know what to do. I don't know who to trust anymore. But you've always been honest with me. Please." Selina agreed to meet him, not because she felt sorry for him, but because this was the moment she had been waiting for. The moment when Aidan finally understood that his carefully constructed life was built on foundations of sand and lies, and it was all about to collapse. She dressed carefully for the meeting, armor disguised as simple clothes, and drove to the coffee shop where her new life had begun months ago, the place where Nathaniel had first offered to help her see past the performance to the truth beneath. It was time for Aidan to see that truth too, and then she would watch him choose between being the man he should have been and the man he had become. Either way, she was finally free. Chapter 8. Early January brought snow that turned the city quiet and white, muffling sound and making everything feel suspended in time. Selina had moved into a small apartment across town, a one-bedroom with thin walls and heating that rattled through the night. It was nothing like the house she had shared with Aidan, but it was hers, paid for with money from the bank account he had never known existed. She was making coffee when her phone rang at 7 in the morning. Aidan's name on the screen made her hand shake, but she answered on the third ring, keeping her voice neutral. "Selina." His voice was wrecked, raw from crying or shouting or both. "I need to see you, please. I know I don't deserve it, but please." "Why?" she asked simply. "Because Cameron told me something impossible, and I don't know what's real anymore." A pause, then quieter. "I think my mother has been lying to me about everything." They agreed to meet at the coffee shop where Nathaniel had first warned her about the Paris family. Selina dressed carefully, not for battle, but for closure. She was going to end this regardless of what Aidan decided. When she arrived, Aidan was already there, hunched over a cold cup of coffee. He looked terrible, his hair uncombed, clothes wrinkled like he had slept in them, eyes hollow with the kind of exhaustion that comes from having your entire reality questioned. "Thank you for coming," he said as she sat down. "I wasn't sure you would." "What did Cameron tell you?" Selina asked. Aidan pulled out his phone and showed her a paternity test. Cameron had somehow obtained a sample from the baby and had it analyzed without Aidan's knowledge or permission. The results were clinical and absolute. Aidan Key was excluded as the biological father. "That baby isn't mine," Aidan whispered. "My son isn't my son. Cameron said you already knew, that you've known for months." "Yes," Selina confirmed. "I hired an investigator. The baby's father is Julian Drake, a media consultant. McKenna got pregnant by him, then needed someone powerful to legitimize the child. You were convenient." Aidan flinched like she had struck him. His hands trembled, fingers tapping against the table in rapid, unconscious patterns. Selina watched him with clinical detachment, cataloguing the micro-expressions of a man whose identity was being deleted in real time. "My mother knew." "Your mother orchestrated it," Selina replied. She leaned forward, keeping her voice low and precise. "She's been taking payments from Harrison Paris for 18 months. They identified you as a useful political tool, ambitious enough to manipulate, connected enough to be valuable. Judith agreed to facilitate a relationship between you and McKenna in exchange for money and political favors." She watched Aidan process this, watched the careful edifice of his life collapse behind his eyes. His pupils dilated, shock he couldn't fake. His breathing changed, became shorter, faster, the beginning of hyperventilation. "I don't know what to do," Aidan said, and his voice broke. "I don't know who to trust or what's real or how to fix any of this." The barista glanced over, then quickly away. The espresso machine had stopped hissing. Even the snow outside seemed to fall more quietly. "You can't fix it," Selina said quietly. "You can only choose what kind of man you want to be from this point forward." Aidan looked at her with something desperate in his eyes. His hands came up toward his face, hovering there, wanting to hide, but unable to complete the gesture. "Tell me what to do, please. You were always better at seeing through people's bullshit. Tell me how to handle this." "Why would I do that?" Selina asked. "You threw me away like I was nothing. You let your mother erase me from your history. You chose McKenna and her family's money over 10 years of marriage. Why would I help you now?" "Because I'm asking," Aidan said quietly. "I was wrong about everything. I chose ambition over you. I let my mother manipulate me. I was so focused on power that I forgot what actually matters. Please, Selina, please tell me what you need and I'll do it." Selina leaned down so only he could hear her. "You want to know what you should do? Tell the truth. Publicly. Hold a press conference. Explain how you were manipulated. Admit the baby isn't yours. Withdraw from the Senate race. Choose integrity over ambition for once in your life." She stood, forcing him to either stand with her or stay sitting. He remained in his chair, looking up at her with devastation written across every feature. "If I do that, I lose everything," Aidan said. "My political career, my reputation, my relationship with my family." "Yes," Selina agreed, "you lose everything built on lies. But you keep the chance to be someone worth respecting." "Will you forgive me?" Aidan asked. "If I do that? If I choose the truth?" Selina looked at him for a long moment, at this man she had loved for more than a decade, who had promised her forever and delivered betrayal. "No," she said finally, "I won't forgive you, because forgiveness would mean letting you off the hook, and you don't deserve that. But I'll give you something better. I'll give you until the end of the month to make your choice. Tell the truth yourself, or I'll tell it for you." She walked out of the coffee shop, leaving Aidan sitting alone, surrounded by strangers who had witnessed his humiliation. Her phone was already buzzing with texts from Cameron asking if she was okay, from Brielle demanding updates, from the life she was building outside of Aiden's shadow. But that night, alone in her apartment, Selena allowed herself to cry. Not for the marriage she had lost, but for the man she had thought Aiden was underneath the ambition and ego. That man had never existed, or if he had been consumed so long ago that nothing remained worth saving. The end of January came and went. Aiden said nothing publicly, made no statement, gave no press conference, chose silence over truth because silence was easier than accountability. And Selena, alone in her small apartment, made the decision that would cost her everything. If Aiden wouldn't be brave enough to tell the truth, she would have to be brave enough for both of them. Chapter 9. The Darkest Hour. Nathaniel's documentary funding collapsed on the first Monday of the new year. The call came while Selena was standing in front of her open refrigerator, staring at a third of a block of cheese and trying to decide if it was breakfast or should be saved for dinner. "They threatened my investor with a defamation lawsuit," Nathaniel explained, his voice tight with frustration. "Paris Media Group has lawyers who specialize in burying stories like this. Without major funding, I can't complete the documentary or distribute it anywhere that matters." After hanging up, Selena sat on her couch and calculated how much money she had left. $3,000 in savings. Rent was due in 2 weeks. Her car needed repairs she couldn't afford. And she had just lost the only platform that might have given her evidence credibility. She called Andrea Chen, the investigative journalist who had expressed interest weeks ago. "I'll be honest with you," Andrea said, after listening to Selena's pitch. "The story is compelling, but without independently verified evidence, I can't run it. The paternity test could be fake. The financial documents could be explained away. I need something irrefutable, and right now, all I have is your word against a powerful family." "What would make it irrefutable?" Selena asked. "A confession," Andrea replied. "Someone admitting on record that they orchestrated this fraud. But people like Judith Key don't confess. They hire lawyers and spin narratives and wait for the scandal to blow over." Selena spent the next week trying every angle she could imagine. She reached out to former Paris Media Group employees, hoping someone would talk about the financial fraud. Most refused to speak, terrified of lawsuits. The two who agreed to talk off the record couldn't provide documentation without risking their own legal exposure. She contacted political reporters who covered Aiden's campaign. They were sympathetic, but cautious, unwilling to run a story that might be perceived as personal vendetta rather than legitimate journalism. She even tried calling McKenna directly, hoping the younger woman might be willing to admit the truth. The call went straight to voicemail, and McKenna never called back. Every door closed. Every avenue led nowhere, and Selena's bank account kept shrinking. By mid-January, she was down to $1,800. She skipped meals to save money, turned off the heat at night and slept under every blanket she owned. Stopped buying coffee, stopped going anywhere that cost money, stopped pretending she wasn't terrified of becoming completely broke with no career and no safety net. Cameron called with an idea. "What if I confronted Mum? Recorded her admitting everything?" "She'll take your phone first," Selena said tiredly. "Your mother is too smart to confess on tape." "Then what do we do?" Cameron asked desperately. "I don't know," Selena admitted. "I'm out of ideas and almost out of money." That night, she called Nathaniel and told him the truth about her financial situation, that she had maybe 2 months before she was completely broke, that she couldn't afford to keep fighting much longer. "Move in with me," Nathaniel said immediately. "You don't have to do this alone." "I barely know you," Selena replied. "We've only been friends for a few months. I can't just move into your apartment." "Then let me help financially," Nathaniel insisted. "I have savings. Let me—" "No," Selena interrupted. "I won't become someone who needs to be rescued. I spent 10 years being financially dependent on Aiden. I'm not doing that again." After hanging up, she sat in the dark and faced the truth. She was losing. Not dramatically, not in some spectacular defeat, but slowly, exhaustingly, the way most people lost against systems designed to protect the powerful. She was running out of money, running out of options, running out of the energy required to keep fighting when every door slammed in her face. She could give up, sign the divorce papers, take whatever settlement Aidan offered, walk away quietly. Use her remaining savings to move somewhere new, start over, build a life that had nothing to do with revenge or justice or making people understand what they had done to her. It would be so much easier than continuing to fight. Her phone rang 3 days later. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Dr. Godot?" A woman's voice, young and scared. "My name is Elena Park. I used to work at Paris Media Group. I heard you were investigating them. I've been too scared to come forward, but I can't watch them destroy more lives." Selina sat up straighter. "Do you have information?" "I have everything," Elena said quietly. "Financial records, emails, documentation of how they've been inflating circulation numbers and manipulating ratings for years. I kept copies before I quit because I knew eventually someone would need them." "Why didn't you come forward before?" Selina asked. "Because I was terrified," Elena admitted. "They threatened to destroy my career if I ever talked. But I've been following your story online. What they did to you, what they're doing to Aidan Key, it's the same pattern they've used against dozens of people, and I'm tired of being scared." They met the next day at a library 30 miles outside the city. Elena brought a flash drive containing years of documentation, fake circulation reports, doctored ratings data, emails discussing how to extort politicians and business leaders, financial records showing systematic fraud. "This is everything?" Selina asked, scrolling through files. "Everything I could get," Elena confirmed. "But Dr. Godot, if you use this, they'll know it came from me. They'll sue me, destroy my reputation, make sure I never work in media again." "I know," Selina said quietly, "and I can't promise to protect you. If we do this, we both pay a price." Elena nodded slowly. "I've made my peace with that. Some things are worth the cost." Selina took the flash drive to Andrea Chen that afternoon, spent 6 hours going through every document, verifying details, confirming sources. By midnight, Andrea was convinced. "This is legitimate," Andrea said, exhaustion and excitement mixing in her voice. "This proves systematic fraud. Combined with your story about Judith's involvement with Aidan's campaign, this is enough. I can run it." "When?" Selina asked. "Tomorrow night," Andrea replied. "But Selina, once this goes public, there's no taking it back. The Paris family will come after you with everything they have. Lawsuits, smear campaigns, attempts to discredit you as an unstable ex-wife. Are you ready for that?" Selina thought about her dwindling bank account, her lost career, the quiet life she could have if she just walked away. Then she thought about Judith erasing her from family photos, about Aidan choosing lies over their marriage, about McKenna using pregnancy to trap a man who didn't know he was being manipulated. "I'm ready," she said. The story went live the next evening, not in a major outlet, but on Andrea's independent journalism platform with a reach that extended far beyond its size. The headline was simple: "Rising political star Aidan Key caught in paternity fraud orchestrated by mother and corrupt media empire." The details were devastating. Judith's payments from Harrison Paris, McKenna's affair with Julian Drake, the baby that wasn't Aidan's, the systematic fraud at Paris Media Group, the manipulation of a man too ambitious to see he was being used by everyone around him. Within hours, it was everywhere. Social media exploded. Major news outlets picked up the story, crediting Andrea's investigation. Selina's phone wouldn't stop ringing with interview requests, which she ignored. She had told her truth. What people did with it was no longer her concern. The backlash came fast. By the next morning, Judith's lawyers had filed multiple lawsuits. The Paris family issued statements calling the story fabricated lies from a vindictive ex-wife. Conservative media outlets questioned Selina's mental health and motives, but the evidence was public now. Too many documents, too much proof, Too many corroborating sources for it to be dismissed as personal vendetta. The truth was out there, messy and incomplete and imperfect, but undeniable. Selina sat in her cold apartment and felt hollow. She had won, but the victory tasted like nothing at all. Just exhaustion and the knowledge that tomorrow she would still be broke, still be alone, still be facing lawsuits she couldn't afford to defend against. Nathaniel came over that evening without asking permission. He brought Chinese food and sat with her in silence, not trying to fix anything, just being present while she processed what she had done. "Was it worth it?" he asked quietly. Selina thought about that question for a long time. "Ask me in a year," she finally said. "Right now, I'm too tired to know." Chapter 10. What Truth Costs. The State Psychology Board suspended Selina's license 3 months after the story broke. Not for the fabricated complaints Judith had threatened, but for something worse. Professional ethics violations related to using psychological expertise to expose corruption. Dr. Gadot demonstrated sophisticated understanding of human psychology in her interactions with the Key family, the board's decision stated. While we acknowledge she was a victim of systematic fraud, the question remains whether licensed psychologists should weaponize their training for personal objectives, however justified those objectives may be. Selina sat in the hearing room and listened to her career end. Permanent license suspension pending ethics review that could take years. No practice, no clients, no professional identity she had spent a decade building. Her lawyer tried to appeal, but Selina stopped him. "Let it go," she said tiredly. "I knew this was possible when I made my choice." The financial consequences were worse than she had imagined. Judith's lawsuits dragged on for 18 months, burning through Selina's remaining savings and then some. She sold her car to pay legal fees, moved to an even smaller apartment when she couldn't make rent, started working at a coffee shop for minimum wage because she needed money and had no other options. The woman who had been a respected psychologist now spent her days making lattes and cleaning tables, coming home exhausted to an apartment with furniture from thrift stores and heating she could only afford to run a few hours a day. Nathaniel offered to help financially, multiple times. Each time, Selina refused. "I need to survive this on my own," she explained one evening when he came by with groceries she hadn't asked for but desperately needed. "If I let you rescue me, I become someone who needs rescuing. I can't do that again." "Accepting help isn't the same as being rescued," Nathaniel argued gently. "Maybe not," Selina replied, "but I can't tell the difference right now. Everything feels too close to how it was with Aiden, when I was dependent on him for everything, and that dependence became another way to control me." Nathaniel's patience began showing cracks. Not dramatic breaks, but small signs of exhaustion. Coming by less frequently, calling only every few days instead of every evening. The distance growing between them not from lack of love, but from the grinding reality that loving someone in crisis was exhausting when that someone kept pushing help away. "I don't know how to be with you," Nathaniel admitted one night 6 months after the story broke. "You won't let me help. You won't move in with me. You're drowning, and you keep refusing the life preserver I'm throwing you." "Then stop throwing it," Selina said, more harshly than she intended. "I didn't ask you to save me. I didn't ask for any of this." They fought, really fought, for the first time, angry words about boundaries and pride, and whether Selina was pushing him away on purpose because she didn't know how to trust anyone anymore. "I love you," Nathaniel finally said, exhausted, "but I can't keep watching you suffer when you won't let anyone help you survive it." He left that night without saying goodbye. Selina sat alone in her apartment and wondered if she had just destroyed the one good thing that had emerged from this nightmare. The legal battles finally settled after 18 months. Most of Judith's lawsuits were dismissed, but the process had cost Selina everything. She was $43,000 in debt from legal fees, working minimum wage with no career prospects, living in a studio apartment and buying groceries based on what was on sale rather than what she actually wanted to eat. Justice had been served technically. The Paris Media Group declared bankruptcy. Harrison Paris faced financial penalties. Judith's reputation was destroyed, though she retained enough wealth to live comfortably. Aidan had withdrawn from public life, teaching at a small college in another state, his political career finished. But Selina had paid for that justice with everything she had. Her career, her savings, her relationship with Nathaniel, her sense of security, her belief that doing the right thing meant anything more than surviving the consequences. She started writing about trauma and recovery because writing was free and she needed to process what had happened to her. A blog post about surviving betrayal went viral, then another about the cost of telling truth to power. Within months, she had a following. Women who had survived similar experiences, who recognized themselves in her story. A small publisher offered her a book deal. The advance was modest, barely enough to make a dent in her debt, but it was something. Writing became therapy, became income, became the thing that kept her moving forward when everything else felt impossible. Nathaniel reached out 8 months after their fight. They met for coffee, cautious and bruised, both of them having learned that love wasn't enough without trust and communication, and the willingness to accept help without seeing it as weakness. "I'm sorry," Selina said before he could speak. "I pushed you away because I was terrified of being dependent on anyone again. But I confused accepting help with losing myself. That wasn't fair to you." "I'm sorry too," Nathaniel replied. "I kept trying to fix things when what you needed was just for someone to sit with you in the mess. I made it about me when it should have been about us figuring out how to survive this together." They started over slowly, dating like they were strangers, learning each other for the first time, building trust through small, consistent actions rather than grand gestures, learning that relationships after trauma required work and patience and the willingness to keep trying even when it was difficult. Nathaniel proposed a year later, not with certainty or confidence, but with quiet hope that they could build something real if they were both willing to do the work. "I love you," he said, "and I think we could make this work if we're both brave enough to try. But I need to know you'll let me in, that you won't push me away every time things get hard." "I'm learning," Selina replied honestly. "I can't promise I'll be perfect at it, but I can promise I'll keep trying." They married in early fall. Small ceremony, close friends, nothing grand or public. When they exchanged vows, Selina promised to choose vulnerability over self-protection, to accept help without seeing it as weakness, to build a partnership instead of a rescue operation. The reception was quiet and intimate. At one point, Brielle raised a glass. "To my sister, who survived what should have destroyed her." Selina raised her own glass. "To the morning truth came knocking. It took everything, but I'm still here." Later that night, lying beside Nathaniel in their rented apartment, with second-hand furniture and debt that would take years to pay off, Selina thought about that terrible morning when Brielle had knocked with photographs that destroyed everything. That knock had cost her almost everything. Her career was gone permanently, her financial security destroyed, years lost to legal battles and survival rather than building a future. The victory over Judith and the Paris family felt hollow because they had survived with their wealth mostly intact, while Selina struggled to pay rent. But she had survived, scarred, diminished, fundamentally changed, but alive and free from the slow suffocation of her marriage to Aidan. She had learned that justice was expensive and incomplete, that doing the right thing didn't guarantee reward, that surviving trauma meant accepting you would never be the same person you were before it happened. She had also learned she was stronger than she believed possible, that losing her career didn't mean losing her value, that love could exist without manipulation if both people were brave enough to be honest about their wounds. The morning truth had knocked at her door, and Selina had answered knowing it would cost her everything. She had paid that price, was still paying it, would probably always be paying it in small ways that added up to a life that was harder, smaller, more scarred than she had imagined. But it was hers, built on truth instead of lies, on survival instead of comfort, on the hard-won knowledge that she could lose everything and still find reasons to keep living. Outside, the sun rose over a city full of people carrying their own wounds, their own losses, their own version of survival. Selina pulled Nathaniel closer and let herself feel something close to peace. Not happiness exactly, not the life she had planned or hoped for, but real and earned and entirely her own. The morning truth had knocked at her door, and she had answered it with courage, paid the price, and survived. The end.